Hello, welcome to Whiskey for Beginners. These you just saw, it's a thoroughly amateur production. You probably don't need me or the title card to tell you that. Just the very unprofessional quality of the video will get that across. But then this is not really supposed to be a highly professional channel. It's for beginners to whiskey. I'm trying to get all the information in one place that when I was a new whiskey drinker, I couldn't find in one place. And this is the next to last in a series of over 30 videos that I've planned out to cover things that I wish I had known, that I wished I could have found in one spot. And they wound up all being in the form of questions that I then answer. And the question that I want to ask today, let me pull that up on the screen. Normally I work from the keyboard, but I've got it set up. I can't reach the keyboard. I'm reaching out and not getting there. But the question today is, what do I like about whiskey? I can tell you right off, I don't like it because it can make you drunk. It certainly can. And there are people who drink specifically for the purpose of getting wired. And 40 years ago and more, when I was in Korea before I met my wife, that was why I drank. I did it to a much lesser extent, but still occasionally for another few years until in 1983 I became a Christian. And for years after that, I didn't drink at all. And that's a whole long story that I'm not going to go into now. My point right now is that I don't drink whiskey for the effect. Yes, alcohol does have an effect. Yes, I sometimes do feel some of it, and I back off at that point. Because the reason I drink whiskey is as an experience. I like the color of it. You get a glass of good whiskey that's aged in the barrel, and you hold it up to the light, and you can see that color, and it's pretty. I don't know how the tradition began, but when I buy a bottle, if the light is at all good, I set it on top of the car and take a couple of pictures of it. And when the light comes through bourbon, certainly, and perhaps other kinds of whiskey as well, the juice looks red. And back in the 1800s, when bourbon was just becoming a recognized variety of whiskey, they'd call it red liquor because of that. And so I like the color of it. It's pretty. I like what they call the legs. You can swirl it around in a glass, and especially at a higher proof, it will cling to the glass, to the inside of it. And then it'll slowly form and run down in what they call legs around the glass. And that's not always an indicator of quality, but it can at least tell you how viscous the whiskey is, how oily it is. And generally, not always, but generally, if you have good legs, you've got good whiskey. I like the aroma. There are whiskeys that I keep nosing, and I have to remind myself to take a sip because they smell so good. You can get the scent of flowers, of honey, of bananas, of cinnamon, of oak and smoke. You can get all sorts of aromas, and each person is going to get different notes on the nose and on the palate. In other words, when you smell it and when you taste it. But good whiskey smells good. Last night, I'm sorry, I keep toying with my mustache. Every once in a while, one hair will start kicking off in the wrong direction and poking me in the mouth. And that's what I've got here. Last night I had a glass of Jack Daniel's single barrel proof, 128.2 proof, the same proof that had come out of the barrel. And the smokiness that I smelled was just wonderful. Then there's the flavor, and that connects to smell. If you've ever had a cold so that you couldn't smell anything and found that the taste of things you love had become bland and unappetizing, you know just how close they connect. And the flavor of whiskey, good whiskey, is good. Again, you can get bananas, you can get cinnamon and various other spices, you can get the smoke and the oak and the honey. And of course, it tastes like whiskey, but you have these other flavors in there too. You can get sweet corn, roasting years. Sometimes I get cream corn. Once, and I can't remember which whiskey it was, but I got hominy. And it wasn't a corn whiskey, although it was one that had corn in it. Very interesting, some of this stuff. There's the finish, and that's really what you can call the aftertaste. And if you've looked at all my videos up to this point, you'll find I've discussed these things elsewhere, what they are. The finish can be very interesting. For me, it is never as complex as the nose or the palate, but sometimes you get things there you don't get elsewhere, like a definite dose of oak. And I like some oak in my whiskey. Not everybody does, and I'm sure I could find too much oak, but I like to have some oak. And the finish is where I mostly get it. Then there's what they call the Kentucky hug, although not all whiskey is, obviously not all whiskey is from Kentucky. Most bourbon is. But they make whiskey in every state of the United States, including bourbon in all these states. I say every state. There may be some where they don't. For all I know, they don't make whiskey in Alaska or Florida or Vermont. You know, I don't know, but they make it all over, make bourbon all over. But whether you call it a Kentucky hug or a Texas hug or just a hug, especially with higher proof whiskey, you can feel the warmth as it goes down. Just as on a hot day you take a drink of cold water, you can feel the cold going down. And that's nice too, for that matter. But I like all these aspects of whiskey. And if you're drinking to get drunk, you're missing all this wonderful stuff. You're missing all these flavorful and aromatic aspects of it. And you're missing something wonderful. Frankly, if the reason you drink is to get drunk, this channel's not for you, because this channel is against drunkenness. But if you want to drink whiskey because of these things that I've talked about, the aroma and the flavor and all this various sensory experience, and I'm not saying it very well, I realize. If you want to drink whiskey for those reasons, then maybe you'll find these aspects of it as pleasant as I do. That's all I have to say in this video. And so, holding up an imaginary glass with imaginary whiskey in it, I can't remember which poet it was, but there was a poet who said that poetry is an imaginary garden with real toads in it. Well, an imaginary glass with imaginary whiskey in it. Here's how.